It's Wednesday, the 2nd of October 2024. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 stories in 5 minutes. Let's go. Story number 1, Qatar Airways will buy 25% of Virgin Australia from its private equity owner, Bain Capital.
As part of the deal, Virgin will resume flying long-haul international routes to Europe using Qatar's planes. It means passengers get more competition in the long-haul market, and there's no need for government approval for additional flights. The deal is subject to Foreign Investment Review Board approval. It helps Bain start offloading its ownership of Virgin, which it took control of back in 2020 in the middle of the COVID pandemic. It will also be subject to the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission approval process. Both Labor's Bill Shorten and Opposition leader Peter Dutton welcomed the announcement. Plenty of bits and pieces going on in this one. Remember last year, the federal government blocked Qatar from flying more services into Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. Well, this somewhat circumvents that problem for Qatar. Virgin CEO Jane Herdlicker said the investment is the missing piece in Virgin's long-term strategy. The deal brings scale to the carrier, allowing it better to compete with Qantas. Virgin frequent flyers should also benefit.
So the general gist of what you're saying, Sean, is that the deal should be good news for passengers wanting long-haul flights, right?
Yes, that's it. Since its reinvention, Virgin has been a cautious competitor, and apart from flights to Bali, Thailand and Fiji, it has pretty much left international routes alone. The domestic end of the market, following the collapse of Bonza and administration of Regional Express, now has a very dominant Qantas Jetstar with about 62% of the market, Virgin about half that level. This deal is about international routes, and judging by the 4% drop in Qantas's share price yesterday, analysts believe it will put more competition into the market. There's more though. Virgin gets some serious aviation clout with Qatar as a shareholder, which could flow through to lower fuel and aircraft maintenance costs. Qatar should also attract interest from other potential investors. Qatar's also a shareholder in a bunch of other airlines. You put all that together, it's good news for Virgin and probably good news for passengers.
All right, moving on to story number 2 now, and the federal government is working to get Australian citizens out of Lebanon as Israel launches a ground invasion into the country.
Some commercial airlines are still flying to Lebanon, though there's a risk that the international airport will close. The government for months has been calling on people to leave the country. The Canadian government has secured 800 seats on commercial flights for its citizens. Yesterday, Treasurer Jim Chalmers urged restraint from all sides, saying Australia was gravely concerned for the human cost of an escalation of this conflict. Yesterday morning, Australian time, Israeli forces crossed into southern Lebanon, marking a significant escalation of the crisis. The last time Israel and Hezbollah engaged in ground combat was a month-long war in 2006. The Israeli military said it had begun a limited, localised and targeted ground raid against Hezbollah in the border area of southern Lebanon. It's also carrying out airstrikes.
Story number 3, Sean, retail trade jumped a surprisingly high 0.7% in August. But the reason, this is why this story is so interesting, it's because of the warmer than usual weather.
Yes, it was the warmest month of August on record, which means since 1910. And the Bureau of Statistics said there was a bunch of people bringing forward spring purchases. Why did they say that? Well, people were buying more summer clothing, more liquor, outdoor dining goods, hardware, gardening items, camping goods and outdoor equipment. Now, given the tax cuts from July 1, strong employment market still, pickup isn't surprising, though the size of the improvement is somewhat a surprise. The retail sales figures jump around a bit. When there's a boom, often that's followed by a pullback in spending. Overall, sales are up more than 3% over the past 12 months, so that's been helped by population growth.
All right, moving on now to story number 4. The latest radio ratings across the country have shifted the playing field somewhat. 2GB, the former number 1 station in Sydney, has slumped to 4th, while ABC's main stations in Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth have all lost ground.
The other big news from the ratings is the performance of Kiss FM's morning team of Kyle Sandilands and Jackie Henderson, Jackie O, as she's better known. Their share in Sydney fell to 13.7%, though they did come in at number 1 ahead of a tumbling Ben Fordham at 2GB. But in Melbourne, where they launched earlier in the year with much fanfare, their numbers are poor, falling another 0.9 percentage points to 5.2%. 3AW remains a clear number 1 in Melbourne, with the breakfast and morning shows doing very well, while ARN Media's Kiss FM was number 1 in Sydney, according to measuring group GfK. At the ABC, the radio national flagship program RN Breakfast lost more listeners in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. Only Breakfast in Sydney with Craig Rucastle was a big improver for the ABC.
Last one, story number 5, Megalopolis, the Francis Ford Coppola film that was financed by the director himself, opened in the US over the weekend and unfortunately it bombed.
It did. The 85-year-old Mr. Coppola spent decades on the avant-garde fable, ultimately selling part of his wine business to raise the necessary funds, about $120 million in production costs, $20 million or so in marketing and distribution expenses. But moviegoers rejected the film, according to a report in the New York Times. In fact, ticket sales from Thursday through Sunday, about $4 million across North America. It played in 2,000 theatres. It's about a brilliant architect, played by Adam Driver, who wants a society to lift itself out of the gutter. Now, ticket buyers gave the film a D+ grade in Cinema Score exit polls. That's rare for a big budget movie from a major director, particularly, to get less than a B-. So definitely a flop.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 2nd of October, 2024. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. And if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed, wherever you listen to podcasts. And today is Wednesday, which means there is a new episode of our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That?, out today. Today's episode is all about buying a house or buying a property with a guarantor. What's involved, some of the risks and some of the benefits that you need to be aware of. We go into all of it with an expert who takes us through it chapter and verse. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.